With over 20,000 criminal homicides each year, who decides if your loved one is deemed newsworthy? Survived in death by family, the fight for justice never ends until all those involved are placed behind bars. Join me as we shed lights on the atrocities of mankind. Welcome to Crimes Among Us. Today on Crimes Among Us, I bring you the mysterious death of Kendrick Johnson. January the 11th, 2013, body of Kendrick Johnson was found in a rolled up mat inside of the gymnasium. This was at the Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, where he was a student. His body had been discovered by fellow students who had allegedly climbed up to the top of the cluster of the mats. These mats stood 6 feet tall, about 3 foot wide. Authorities hypothesized that Johnson had been climbing on the top of the mat and allegedly fallen into the mat trying to retrieve his shoe. And when he couldn't retrieve it or couldn't climb back out, he died. Students at Lowndes told investigators that it was common for students to sometimes hide their shoes behind the mats that were rolled up or somewhere over there in that area. But what I don't understand is, why was this done in the far corner? I mean, this corner was all the way against the wall behind everything else. What was so important about these shoes that everybody in the school just wanted to take them, and he had to take such drastic measures to hide these shoes? Nothing about that makes sense to me. One of the coaches placed the mat in a horizontal position, exposing the upper torso of his body. One student allegedly saw a bruise on Kendrick's jaw, while the other student allegedly saw no form of trauma whatsoever. The shoe that investigators say he was reaching for when he suffocated had no blood on it. It had blood all around it, leading you to think that possibly somebody could have laid the shoe there afterwards to corroborate the story on him dying from reaching for his shoe. Crime scene photos show blood on the walls where the mat was at. I mean, this would have had to been some messy accidental death. Lieutenant Stride Jones, who headed the investigation, stated, "We never had credible information that indicated this was anything other than an accident." Kendrick Johnson went into the gymnasium and he disappeared. He was found later on in the farthest mat in like the back corner of the gymnasium. And they're trying to tell us that he was reaching in there to get his shoes because people would leave their belongings back there, and he just happened to suffocate. No screaming, nothing to alert anyone. He just suffocated to death inside of this mat. But if you look at it, he's so tightly in this mat, it's almost as if someone rolled him up. You can find these pictures online. I'm not going to post the pictures on here. Kendrick's family was very upset about the autopsy. I mean, deservingly so. It just said asphyxia, where he just pretty much died from suffocating. And I mean, nothing about this made sense. Nothing about this added up. So they got another autopsy done, a private autopsy. This autopsy will be done by Mr. William R. Anderson. His findings claim that it was done by a blunt force trauma to the soft tissue of his neck. And this suggested that his death was not an accident. Kendrick was a 3-sport athlete, and they're telling us that this kid, this athletic kid, just climbed up into this thing, fell, and then was not able to get out. I mean, nothing about this makes sense. It's very upsetting. The independent autopsy found that sometime after his body had been recovered and passed through the funeral home, that the brain, tongue, throat, windpipe, heart, lungs, kidneys, every internal organ, all the way to his pelvic, were now missing. According to the funeral home owner, they processed the body following the FBI's autopsy, and they never received the internal organs from the coroner. They were said to have been destroyed through the natural process and discarded. So basically, they trashed the insides of his body. Which, hey, I'm definitely no CSI, but that seems to me that they didn't want any studies being done to see what oxygen lacked where. Due to the empty void that was left in the body, the funeral home stuffed newspapers throughout his body. An investigation by the Georgia Secretary of State office showed that the funeral home did not use the best practice, and other materials would have been more acceptable. Nevertheless, the investigation cleared the funeral home of any wrongdoings. October the 31st, 2013, the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia announced that his office would open a final review into Johnson's death. In 2013, after the surveillance videos were reviewed, one camera was missing 1 hour and 5 minutes, the other 2 hours and 10 minutes. Above my head, you can see one of the last images of him entering the gym before he disappeared. Where the incident happened that is being called an accident by investigators, there was a blind spot where nobody could see. The missing footage is said to be because of motion-activated cameras where there was no motion at that time or the cameras did not correctly pick up the motion. Kendrick Johnson's body was found outside of the range of all of the surveillance cameras. On June 20th, 2016, the Department of Justice let everyone know that they would not be filing any charges when it comes to his death. All right, so let me give y'all a breakdown of Kendrick's autopsies. During the first autopsy, it was stated that it was accidental positional asphyxia, which means that he basically suffocated to death. He couldn't gather any oxygen. The second autopsy conducted blunt force trauma as a cause of death. No blunt force trauma if you fell into the middle of this thing. I mean, you didn't smack the ground. You were caught about halfway down. So that independent autopsy that was done, I mean, that should open eyes right there. The third autopsy, apparent non-accidental blunt force trauma. So once again, it leaves us asking, what really happened to Kendrick Johnson? The Johnson family filed a wrongful death suit against the Lowndes County Board of Education. It implied a race-based dimension. The lawsuit alleged that the defendants were negligent and violated his constitutional right for equal protection. Now, this is based off of the school allegedly ignoring previous reports from Johnson about him being harassed and basically bullied by a white student. The reports also said he was attacked by the same student. The attack allegedly happened on a bus trip 14 months before his death. One of the students' fathers that had been having an altercation with Kendrick was an FBI agent. Now, this could mean nothing, or this could mean everything. The lawsuit further alleged that another student had a history of provoking and attacking Kendrick in front of the coaching staff and the employees. Kendrick had also been allegedly talking to a female that was non-African American. Her boyfriend was Caucasian, and they got in a physical fight because of it. On average, 40% of murders in the U.S. go unsolved. Once a case becomes cold, it is treated as a non-priority. The families that are left without justice need answers. Their cases deserve your undivided attention. Tune in next time and help me ensure what's done in the dark will always come to the light.